For the indomitable Alexander the Great, nothing and no one could halt his relentless march of conquest, from the heart of Macedonia to the very gates of the unknown. Yet, there was a time when he faced a challenge so formidable that his enemies dared to mock him. This is the story of the conquest of the Sogdian Rock, the day Alexander the Great sent forth his winged soldiers. Let's transport ourselves to the year 327 BC. Alexander the Great has already invaded Asia Minor, achieving a resounding victory at the Granicus River. He has also defeated the almighty Persian king Darius III at the Battle of Issus. He has proclaimed himself Pharaoh of Egypt. He has once again defeated Darius for the second and final time at Gaugamela. He has triumphantly entered Babylon, and he has gradually conquered almost the entirety of the Persian Empire. Even so, nothing can quench his thirst for conquest, which drives him further and further east towards the sunrise. His eyes are set on India, but first, a rebellion in the region of Sogdiana, which he had seemingly brought under control, demands his attention. The warlike inhabitants of this territory are offering unexpected resistance, although Alexander the Great's Macedonians have just dealt a blow, defeating Spitamenes, the leader of the Sogdians, whose head has already been delivered to Alexander. Now, a large part of the Sogdian chieftains and rebels have taken refuge in the fortress of the Sogdian Rock, the most imposing of all the Sogdian mountain fortifications, considered impregnable. Upon arriving at the fortress, Alexander the Great could appreciate the difficulty of the challenge that lay before him. The citadel was truly impressive. It was nestled in a rocky massif, completely surrounded by cliffs, and had as its only access a narrow and treacherous path that was perfectly guarded. Attempting to enter that way would have been suicide. To complicate matters further, Arimazes, the Sogdian chieftain in charge of the defense, had stocked up on food for 2 years and had the weather on his side, as the abundant snow in the area not only ensured his water supply, but also made the assault on the position even more difficult. On top of that, according to certain chronicles, Arimazes had up to 30,000 soldiers under his command. Faced with the complexity of the mission, Alexander the Great, perhaps for the first time in a long time, hesitated and even considered the possibility of moving on. However, after a period of reflection, the great conqueror decided to attempt the seemingly impossible. First, he offered through a herald a favorable surrender to Arimazes, but the Sogdian responded arrogantly to Alexander's messenger, telling him to worry about finding soldiers with wings, as otherwise it would be impossible to take the fortress. These words ignited Alexander's wrath, and he devised a plan. He ordered the 300 most agile and experienced siege soldiers in his army to be brought before him, and told them that he would grant the first to reach the summit of the fortress the irresistible sum of 10 talents of gold, 9 to the second, and so on, rewarding the first 10. Taking advantage of the darkness of night, these soldiers, armed with small iron stakes and ropes, set about scaling the stone walls surrounding the fortress. They did so in the most inaccessible area, precisely because it was devoid of guards. During the heroic ascent, 30 men fell and died. This produced great sorrow to Alexander and his troops, especially given the hopeless cause of recovering the bodies for burial. Despite this, as the first rays of dawn painted the sky, Alexander could see his soldiers waving flags at the highest point of the position. That was the signal he had been waiting for all night. The impossible seemed closer and closer. Then, Alexander sent his herald to Arimazes again, this time to demand his surrender. The Sogdian, unaware of what was happening, once again rejected the offer. But at that moment, following Alexander's orders, the herald pointed to the highest part of the fortification and said, "There you have your winged soldiers." It's difficult to imagine what went through Arimazes' mind in that situation. However, the sight of that image made such an impression on him that, without apparently stopping to consider further, such as the fact that the number of invading soldiers was actually quite small. He immediately surrendered the citadel without a fight. Although most sources agree that Alexander treated Arimazes and his people with respect, the Roman historian Quintus Curtius Rufus recounts a very different scene, indicating that Alexander ordered Arimazes and the highest Sogdian officials to be whipped and then crucified, while he gave the rest of the surrendered as slaves. The fortress was also home to a beautiful woman named Roxana. Her powerful father had sent her there, believing she would be protected. It was said of this woman that she was the second most beautiful in all of Asia, only behind Statera, the wife of the Persian king Darius. The fact is that, whether because Alexander was smitten by Roxana's beauty, or because he saw her as a tool to attract her powerful father to his side, Alexander married her. Alexander the Great's conquests would continue for some time, and curiously, it would not be his enemies that would halt them but his own army, which, exhausted after years of campaigns, refused to advance further. Regarding the capture of the Sogdian Rock, while for the general public it is an almost unknown gem among the great feats of Alexander the Great, its importance is evident in the fact that, more than 2,300 years later, it is still studied in military academies around the world, as an example of the impact that a surprise action by a small but motivated and well-trained group of men can have on the enemy. That is also part of Alexander the Great's legacy.